Well, it does seem incredible that anybody should ask the question, but they are. Did the Holocaust really happen? And what proof do we have that even one Jew was killed in a gas chamber? Those questions, however, are being asked and causing furors on campuses all across America, provoked by an ad which is offered by a person that you're about to meet who suggests that the Holocaust needs revisiting. Here is how we put it in this report prepared for our program. Watch this. In just the last 6 months, 15 college newspapers across the country have run advertisements that call for a, quote, open debate of the Holocaust, unquote. The ad claims that the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. has no proof whatever of homicidal gassing chambers, and no proof that even one individual was gassed in a German program of genocide. The ads have caused an uproar everywhere, sparking protests from students and boycotts of the papers. The man who placed all the ads, Bradley Smith, has been called anti-Semitic and a neo-Nazi because of the challenges of the Holocaust. Smith claims he simply wants the truth to be told, that Jews were never placed in gas chambers, and that the figure of 6 million Jewish deaths is an irresponsible exaggeration. And he's not alone in his beliefs. A recent poll by the Roper Organization found that 22% of all Americans believe it's possible the Holocaust never happened. Another 12% say they don't know. So in a time when over 5,000 visitors are crowding the new Holocaust Museum every day, and the film Schindler's List is reducing jaded moviegoers to tears, the question should be asked, how can anyone claim the Holocaust was a hoax? The man responsible for those ads is with us, Bradley Smith, who is going to tell us that he is not an anti-Semite and he's not a Jew.
Yeah, however, you introduced the story inaccurately, and so did your man on the television. We never say. It's simply a press cliche. Nobody says the Holocaust never happened. This is one of the things that should be gotten straight right away. I had to change the text of my ad. The text now reads, I do not say the Holocaust never happened. What I say is, if there were no gas chambers, what was the Holocaust? It's a very different thing, and the press should try to start getting it right. No, it's very important.
All right. You do not deny that anti-Semitism in Europe in the 30s, most especially Germany, Poland, and environs, was visceral, and that Hitler...
We're not talking about any of that. Listen,
please don't be upset with my question.
I'm not upset, but the question is outside the parameter of the issue. I'm running an advertisement that says the museum
We're 3 minutes into this program, and you don't like my question.
The question has nothing to do with what I'm doing.
No.
Listen, this isn't a story.
Let's accept your point here. May I ask you the courtesy of responding to this question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Do you believe that there was, engineered by Hitler and the Third Reich, a strategy of eliminating Jews called the final solution? Do you believe that?
I don't believe it anymore. I used to. I don't believe it. But that's not what I'm talking about. See, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you won't ask the right question. The question is this. We have a $200 million museum in Washington, D.C. It's in America. It's not in Europe. And in the museum, the whole museum is dedicated to the proposition that Jews were killed in gas chambers. They don't have any proof in the museum that Jews were killed in gas chambers. As a matter of fact, they're so sure of guys like you, we'll never ask them the questions they've even invented in the press, nothing personal.
Guys like me.
In the press, guys like you,
go ahead.
who they've even invented a new gas chamber for the museum that we've never heard about before. Mm-hmm. And they don't even know where it is. The historian says it may have been, quote unquote, near Gießen. Yes. This is the best historical writing that $200 million can buy?
Very good. I didn't interrupt you, no? I do ask you, however imperfect my questions may be, to at least grant me the courtesy of trying to speak to these questions.
Sure.
Because this is just to figure out
I'd like to do
where you are, and it is in point, in my imperfect opinion. Do you believe people in Nazi Germany were taken away and killed because they were Jewish?
Well, they were certainly taken away, and Jews were killed. Everybody was killed. This is one of the vulgarities of this story, is that some 40 millions of people were killed during World War II, and were asked to be unusually sensitive to a fragment of those who were killed. We're all
so the Jews did not
to
suffer any... The Jews did not suffer because of their Jewishness.
Sure, Poles suffered because of their Polishness. Ukrainians because of the Ukrainianness. Latvians because of the Latvianness.
Yes.
What is the thing is that if there's a moral issue here, are Jews more important in the murder and chaos that went on during World War II than all other human beings in Europe? If we're interested in suffering, let's discuss it.
It's not a Jewish claim of being more important.
No, it's certainly implication.
All right, but do you deny the existence of anti-Semitism?
Nah.
You do not?
No, who would? Who would? Nobody denies it.
But anti-Semitism institutionalized as it was in the Third Reich, leading to the disappearance and the destruction, the attempted destruction of an entire people.
Listen, it was a racist state. It was a racist state. I don't agree, and I don't think it can really be shown that there was an attempt to physically exterminate the Jews of Europe. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, listen, we got a museum here. You know, I'm not talking about what happened 50 years ago to a foreign people on a foreign continent at the hands of a foreign people. Right. Here we are now, and this is the only issue in the history of the West that is taboo to discuss in our universities. Why is there a taboo? The only historical event in the history of the West that's taboo to have an open debate about.
Well, it is true there's a good deal of restraint on the part of media and civilized people everywhere to inflict more pain on those who have already suffered from this particular chapter of 20th century history. I ask you to not paint me with this brush. You are on this. You are on this program.
I wouldn't think that.
I believe the truth will make us free. I believe that what you've done here can no longer be ignored by mainstream media, and I should say is not being ignored. You appear with us in the company of David Cole, who is a Jew by birth. So, David, you enjoying my program so far, David?
I'd like to get in here.
Yeah, you're looking a little bit... You want to get in, too, huh? You're nervous about time running out. You say there's no proof of gas chambers or the genocide of 6 million Jews. I should ask Mr. Smith, how many Jews died in your estimation?
I don't know.
Well, I was going to get in. I was mistaken. Sit back for a while.
You take people to a concentration camp and show us a door that opens from the inside?
Well, now, wait a minute. I want to first... My studies are based on my own examination into the physical evidence. The gas chambers, the buildings claimed to be the gas chambers, still exist at 2 of the camps in Poland. You can go there, you can conduct forensic tests, or you can go there and just look for yourself. Now, one of the gas chambers at the Majdanek camp...
We'll show you. Show them the film. This is a film that Mr. Cole would be happy to show you and has shown a number of people.
Most importantly, the Zyklon B gas that is said to have been used leaves blue stains and traces on the walls. These are the delousing chambers at Birkenau, at the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. They are loaded with blue staining that indicates Zyklon B gas usage. Here I am in the inside of the delousing chamber. The blue staining is clear. The traces are measurable even 50 years after the fact. But now we come to the inside of a gas chamber, a supposedly murderous gas chamber at the Mauthausen camp in Austria. There is no blue staining on the walls, no Zyklon B traces in the walls. They have been measured. There is no Zyklon B residue. 50 years after the fact, it exists at the delousing chambers. It does not exist in the supposedly homicidal gas chambers. Here we see the door to the Mauthausen gas chamber. It does not lock. It doesn't lock. The latches can be opened from the inside or the outside, as I am showing right here. You cannot lock somebody into this room. You cannot lock somebody out of this room. This is physical evidence. It has nothing to do with what I'm assuming or what I'm guessing about. Then I show a door to one of the gas chambers at the Majdanek camp in Poland. Same thing. The door should be coming up. Here we go. The door latches only from the inside. Here I am. I'm standing inside the gas chamber, and I am showing the latches from the inside. Now, this door opens into the chamber. If you're going to pack 1,000 people in a room and kill them, you can't have a door that then opens into the room because they will be piled up against the door where they died. And I am now showing that the latches of this door, they latch inside. You cannot lock somebody into this room.
Okay. Well, you're a real Columbo, David.
No, wait a minute. Wait, now, excuse me, Phil. Why don't you ask, no, wait a minute. Why don't you ask why anyone else hasn't brought this up in 50 years since the war was over? Why haven't there been other Columbos?
How many Jews died, David, in your opinion?
It's impossible to say right now. Why don't you ask
Well, would you have an
why
idea?
Don't you, ask...
you certainly seem to know which way the doors opened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, aren't we... Let me just talk personally about how old are you, David?
Wait a minute. I want to put the issue in some perspective, especially for the audience. When the war was over in 1945, it was claimed that there were 22 camps that had gas chambers in them. 22. By the 1950s, 16 of those camps had been officially revised by the Americans, the Israelis, the British, the Soviets, and now it was only claimed that 6 camps in Poland had gas chambers. In other words, what happened was the camps that were in Germany and Austria were able to be investigated by Americans, freely investigated by historians, but the camps in Poland were not made available to Western researchers until recently. Show. Well, yeah, but this is a complex topic.
It certainly is. David, you are familiar and know and have traveled with Ernst Zundel, is that so?
No, I have not traveled with Ernst Zundel.
Did you meet him in Poland?
I met him in Poland. I've met him twice in my entire life.
Right,
I have met him twice in my entire life.
What did you do, have a beer? I mean, what's travel mean? You met him in Poland.
Yeah.
He introduced you to he is a neo-Nazi. You don't deny that.
Of course he is.
And he had an access program in Colorado, which has subsequently been pulled off the air after complaints by the Simon Wiesenthal Center.
No, I'm sorry, Phil. This is not about who I have met in my life. I just met you. Does that mean I'm Marlo Thomas? This is about...
What is it about?
This is about physical evidence. This is about the gas chambers not having Zyklon B residue. This is about windows in a gas chamber. One clip they didn't show was me standing in front of the Majdanek gas chamber with a big plate glass window in it that was not barred or covered in any way.
Were you bar mitzvahed, David?
I'm an atheist. I made that clear to your production staff.
Well, but you may not have been at age 13.
I've always been an atheist.
You've always been. But you do claim Zundel as a friend, do you?
No, he's a man I met twice in my life. I met Mayor Bradley. I met Mayor Bradley twice in my life. It doesn't bother you to be a social companion of a neo-Nazi? I am not a social companion. I said hi to him.
For what purpose would you meet him in Poland?
I was in Poland. He was in Poland. He heard there was a Jewish revisionist. He came by to say hi. What am I supposed to do? Kick him in the balls?
I see.
Please, no, wait a minute. Please,
let me just give you this.
No, please be clear that I have also worked with Holocaust researchers on the other side of this issue. I have worked with them far more than anyone.
Do you believe in anti-Semitism? I asked you, David.
Of course I do.
You do?
Of course I do.
And do you believe it was especially virulent in Germany?
Of course I do.
You do. And do you believe people disappeared and were destroyed because of their Jewishness?
People were, let's be specific.
You go from of course to
No, wait a minute. Be specific. People were rounded up based on their religion alone, their ethnicity alone, their political views alone. They were put in camps and made to work at forced labor. They were killed. They were shot. There was all manner of brutality. It is something that no human being should ever have to go through.
How many would you say died?
But history books are not about making crass generalizations. If you are going to claim there was a gas chamber program, you have to be able to offer evidence for it.
But you claim much more than that. You claim that 6 million did not die.
The 6 million figure is already dead. In 1989, the Auschwitz State Museum, which had claimed from the Nuremberg trials in 1945 and 46 onwards that 4.1 million people died at Auschwitz. In 1989, that number was officially revised to somewhere around 700,000.
Yes, we do have people who care very much about the existence of what some argue are deniers. These gentlemen would say revisionists. Michael Shermer will join us in a moment. He's a professor of history at Occidental College in Los Angeles. And also Edith Glick, who was 17 years old when she was taken to Auschwitz with her mother and 3 sisters. Her mother and her 2 sisters were killed. We'll be back to meet them in just a moment. Dr. Michael Shermer is professor of history at Occidental College in Los Angeles. Well, what a wonderful opportunity for you. I'll tell you what, you know, Louis Farrakhan, the speeches at Keene College. This is a very, very with all of this coming together, including Schindler's List. I'm going to tell you something you already know. The Holocaust Museum declined to send someone here, and the Wiesenthal Center also declined. And I have to say, I understand they don't want to honor this kind of presentation with their presence. You obviously don't think so.
So what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Yes, I talked to many of my fellow Holocaust scholars, and basically I publish a magazine called Skeptic in addition to doing my history stuff. And we investigate extraordinary claims, fringe groups, social movements, things like that.
Right.
And when we started doing the creationists, Scientologists, and so on, I noticed when we began to look into the Holocaust deniers that there was a pattern that I recognized. For example, David's footage, which is very interesting, and I've been on the phone all morning calling to ask answers to some of your questions.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, Holocaust scholars have already been asking some of those questions, and they are trying to answer them.
Wait a minute, so you're saying that...
No, wait, let me finish. Revising any historical event is, of course, what historians do. But one of the tactics that all of these fringe groups do to try to move into the mainstream is to focus on what we don't know about some particular subject and ignore all the evidence that we do have. For example, why do we have so many huge orders of Zyklon B? Why do we have, for example, some of these pictures?
The poison gas
Yes.
that was used.
Why do,
Poison gas
yes.
that was used.
Why do we have huge blowers to re-aerate the chambers if all you're doing is delousing clothing and mattresses?
Talk about them in one chamber. Talk about them in one crema.
Okay, second strategy. You shift the burden of proof.
Your mic's open, David. And incidentally, you were all alone without opposition in the first segment of this program. Now you're going to do this when he comes out?
Wait a minute.
Let's go. Give him a shot. Wait a minute.
He is saying that I am a member...
Okay.
Wait a minute, no. He is saying...
Your reputation will be intact, I assure you,
that I'm a member of a fringe group. I am not a member of any group.
All right, well, you wanted to say.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Shermer, please, you wanted to say.
Yes, okay. Well, one of the things you do is you shift the burden of proof from the established wisdom to the established wisdom away from yourself. See, the burden of proof is not on us to prove the Holocaust happened. That's been happening for 50 years. We've established that. The burden of proof is on them to prove that it didn't happen. And finding bits and pieces of inconsistencies in an eyewitness testimony or the door didn't open. Look, you don't have to have a lock to keep a door closed. You can slam boxes up against it. You can hold it closed. That's not a problem.
Opens in.
But, you be curious to know what Mr. Smith, Mr. Cole feel about this. Here is a film familiar to those who've watched documentaries. You know, who are these people and how did they die? This is a film which comes to us from Holocaust Memorial Archives. Here is the gas chamber with a door, incidentally, of the kind of... Now, are you saying that these people are just people who opposed the Third Reich? Or just accidentally dead? How do you look at this grim feature of the late 30s and 40s in Germany and Poland and say that there was no Holocaust?
Listen, what I tried to explain that to you a few minutes ago. We don't say there was no Holocaust. We don't say that Jews didn't die. 40 million people died. Let me try and explain the vulgarity of what you just did. For instance, if someone is committing brutalities in a war, and you're going to look at the brutalities caused during this war, you're going to show the brutalities that have been exercised on both sides. For instance, this is always shown. This is stuff that's, but you don't show.
That footage, I'd like to ask Dr. Shermer question. They just showed the Donahue gas chamber in that footage. Is that gas chamber ever claimed to have killed people or not?
No, and in fact, the important point here is that
there's a sign at Dachau notifying tourists of that fact.
It was not used to kill people. So why did you just show it in the clip?
Oh, I'm not at all sure that was Dachau. That was Dachau.
Oh, that wasn't. Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. You're not sure that was Dachau. You show a clip on your show, and you're not sure it was Dachau.
Okay, look, it doesn't matter because.
No, wait a minute.
Because
it
look,
does matter.
Let him make his point.
History is knowledge, and like all knowledge, it progresses and changes. We continually refine our certainty about claims. And so we once thought there was human soap, the human soap story was true. Now we know it's not. And that's what historical revisionism is all about.
But it seems to me you've got a number of people seizing at this moment in our national life on these reports that I'm not sure were ever encoded in granite, and suggesting that because there was some hyperbole with regard to lampshades, that therefore the whole story of
that's right. That's called the slippery slope argument. If this is wrong, then maybe this is wrong, then maybe this is wrong. Hey, maybe the whole thing didn't happen. That's a logical fallacy.
We will be back to allow this audience to make its own inquiries of these people who feel they've been mistreated. And we'll also meet Edith Glick, who has more than a passing interest in what these people are saying. She was a survivor, and we'll be back in just a moment. We lost David Cole. Are you there, caller? Hi.
Yes, hi. I was a participant in a program called March of the Living, which is a march from Auschwitz to Birkenau, and I've also been in several of the death camps in Poland. My question first is for Mr. Smith. I wanted to know if he's ever been to Poland and seen with his own eyes the pile of eyeglasses, of shoes, of luggage. The second comment is I'm a graduate from one of the colleges that put in the ad in the college paper, Brandeis University in Boston, and I wanted to also let him know that they took the money that he used to place the ad in the paper and sent it to the Holocaust Memorial Museum, so he can place as many ads as he'd like.
You did publish the ad at Brandeis.
Yes, they did publish the ad.
Yes.
And there was
the First Amendment lives at Brandeis. Sure that the school and you and a lot of people took the heat. Have you seen those?
I've not been to Europe.
You've never been to Europe?
No.
Yes. You wanted to say, caller, yes.
Yes, I'd just like to make a point that although many people of different religions were lost in the Holocaust, I think it's especially important to the Jewish people because we are only 1% of the population of the entire world, and that's why it's so important to the Jews. And I think he made a comment at the beginning of the show about, why he thinks it's such a big deal that, Jews especially are concerned with the Holocaust.
Well, I don't think, if I may say, it's about numbers or percentages.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's about I think it's about a prejudice, a hatred and a fear that's fueled by ignorance that we call anti-Semitism. And for that reason, we should celebrate everybody who stands up to speak to the issue of the extermination of any people that's considered to be outside the contemporary mainstream. You wanted to say, caller.
Hi, I'm a 24-year-old Catholic white person, and I've never understood what people don't like about Jewish people. I've asked a lot of people, and no one knows why people don't like Jewish people.
It isn't true that people don't like Jewish people. It is true that for a long, long time now, we've had enough people develop a hatred and a fear of Jews to cause some very terrible things to happen. Things worse than just your average, I don't like my neighbor attitude. You wanted to say, sir.
Yes, I've been recently to the Holocaust Museum, sir. You seem to be objecting to the museum itself. And the first thing I learned when I was there was that it wasn't just against the Jews. There were all races that were being persecuted by Hitler. And it seems to me that that's one purpose of the museum. You seem to be so against the museum because it singles out Jews.
No, I'm really against the museum because it has a theory here, promotes a theory that millions of Jews were killed in gas chambers, and that there simply is, this can't be demonstrated to be true. And what really interests me is that when you ask someone, I asked this advertisement that's published in 36 newspapers now, listen, where is the evidence for the gas chambers? And they all say, gee, I really don't want to talk to you about it.
I have a comment for him and a question. I want to know, why would you do this to these people after all this time? And are you making money on this? Is this political?
How do you want to respond to that?
Why do I do it to whom?
Why are you doing it?
Well, one of the problems here, we have a feeling that if we talk about this issue, nobody is involved but Jews. Germans are involved. For instance, if we tell there's something vulgar about lying about Germans, and thinking that it's proper. For instance, it was a lie that Germans cooked Jews to make soap from them. It was a lie, and it was institutionalized.
No, not a lie. Not a lie. It's a mistake.
That's true. They made lampshades and they cooked soap. It's true.
Ask the professor.
Excuse me.
Ask the professor.
Historians make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We're always refining our knowledge. And some of these things come down and they don't turn out to be true. But let me tell you what I think is going on.
This is not true. Tell her it's not true.
Let me tell you what I think is going on.
Because and ask why they're doing that to this woman. Why have they taught this woman to believe the Germans cooked and skipped? Did you see them yourself?
I was 7 months in Auschwitz.
And you saw them make soap
lived near
from
the
people?
crematorium as far as I am from you. I smelled, you would never eat roast chicken if you would have been there. Because I smelled 24 hours
you mentioned
roast
soap
chicken
and lampshades. Let's get to the bottom of one thing. She says soap and lampshades.
Yes.
The professor says you're mistaken.
You know
is
what?
there
Even
room
the
for open
Germans
debate?
admitted. They admitted that they had lampshades from...
Right. Do you have any empathy at all?
Why would anyone do this to her?
Are you concerned about the pain that you cause this woman?
Sure. Yeah, but why should we
ignore... Accepting the virtue of your motives here.
Why should we ignore the Germans who are accused of this despicable story?
Listen,
so in other words, you feel that...
I was 7 months there. If you are blind, somebody else should see it. I was 7 months there.
So what? What does that have to do with soap? No soap.
No soap?
No soap, no lampshades. Let her finish one story.
Yes.
Listen, the professor says you're wrong, that's all.
No, he wasn't there.
Oh,
they certainly...
The Germans themselves said that. And the people who were there 4 years before me said that. That you should know that don't use that because that could be your mother's.
A doctor of history, Occidental College, he says you're mistaken.
They burnt bodies in masses. Great.
And we'll be back in just a moment. We're joined by Edith Glick, who was taken to Auschwitz at age 17 with your mother and your 3 sisters. That is your sister, with whom we've been speaking here just a moment ago. She is, and you then, are the only survivors of your family. What would you want to share with us, Mrs. Glick? You've heard the testimony of Mr. Smith.
Yes, I'm not shocked because I have heard it before. But when we arrived in Auschwitz, we were 4 sisters and 1 brother, and my mother, who was 39 years old. And my brother was taken on they separated the male from the female right away. And then I can still see Mengele was standing there.
Joseph Mengele.
Yes. He was standing there. He had a vest on, and he was pointing with his fingers which way to go. They separated the young from the old. And my sister and myself, he directed on one side, and my mother and the 2 younger sisters on the other side with the old people. My mother was still 39 years old, and my 2 younger sisters started crying terribly that Mengele separated them. So Mengele didn't want to have a big commotion. Sister, that is good that my mother went on that side with them because they need her more than we did because we were older. And when we arrived in the middle of the night in Auschwitz, we saw that big flame far away and a big chimney that smoke was coming out. And that group that my mother and younger sisters and a bunch of older and younger people marched towards that big flame, and we never saw them again. And afterwards, people who were there 2 or 3 years before us was telling us, do you think that you're going to see your family again? They are in that smoke already. They are burning, So we thought that they are there such a long time that they lost their mind already. And we didn't believe them. But they kept telling us, and people who was working in the crematorium and the gas chambers for about 6 weeks, they came back at night and they told us what they saw. The people were gassed, and then they were transporting people from the gas chambers to the crematorium.
Right.
And after 6 weeks, they disappeared because they were gassed themselves. The Germans, they were working very systematically. They didn't want any living proof.
Yes. I believe you. I believe what you say. I would say Mr. Smith believes what you say. But Mr. Smith calls attention to the fact that the testimony is always someone who talked to someone who heard someone. And that is why I think we need a much more informed, organized coalition of historians who care about this dark chapter of the 20th century to speak to this. I mean no disrespect to you, Mr. Shermer.
No, in fact,
but you know,
that's why I'm here.
I am struck by the fact that the last thing you worked on was shooting down the creationists. I mean, yeah, I mean, where are the people whose commitment to the ideal of never again, the people who built the museum in Washington, the proud people who put together the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, can, in my opinion, no longer continue to ignore this man who is creating all kinds of theater on campuses across America by doing nothing more than asking for them to take his money so that he can put an ad in their campus newspaper. I think the memory of those who died is honored by a stand-up debate with this man who claims...
Well, that's why she's very courageous to come here, and she's one of 10,000 bits of data that proves the Holocaust, and we're glad you're here.
And we'll be back to let this audience in this program in just a moment. Meet Dave Koenig, who is editor of The Quad, which is the Queens College newspaper, proud institute of higher education here in the city, with a significant percentage of its student body Jewish.
Yeah, it's about 30%. We got the ad from Federal Express from Mr. Smith.
So he sends the ad and a check?
Yeah, he sent the check with the ad. He assumed that it would be inserted.
Right.
We took the ad, the editor-in-chief made copies of it, handed it out to the editors. We looked at it, we debated it, we read it. We came up a week later for a vote. 7-2 voted to run it, not necessarily as an ad, but to run it. What we decided to do was we would erase the bottom where he asks for donations and you get literature in return. We erased his fax number, his address.
Yeah.
Otherwise we did not touch the ad. We made it appear as an illustration. We sent back his blood money, and we wrote an editorial next to it condemning for what he's doing.
Mrs. Glick was emotional in describing her experience, and I'm just wondering, my heart went out to you, and I'm just wondering, how have you overcome some of the mental, emotional torture that you must have gone through during that time as a child?
Yes.
I guess we had no choice. What choice did we have? We just went where they told us to go. Probably I believe that they gave us some kind of sedative they did give us some kind of medicine to make us calm.
I think, is there a caller there?
Yes.
You wanted to say.
Yes, my mother was in the Hitler Youth, and she was a fanatic follower, and she produced babies for Adolf Hitler, and I was born in Lebensborn, the special clinic next to Dachau, and I had a defect on my left ear. And Josef Mengele, when he saw it, he took me for experiments. I saw the Jewish tortured. I saw everything. I saw soap made from the people. I saw lampshades. I saw it all. And there are gas stoves. I saw it. And I'm a full-blooded German. And I have no contact with my family because they're all Nazis. And by today, I'm emotionally destroyed.
Right.
Or I have to go see psychiatrists. Or I have to go see psychiatrists.
Yes. Mr. Smith would say to this woman that, first of all, you believe her account.
Which woman? The woman
on the phone.
Oh, I couldn't figure out half of it. Yeah. I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, you were not interested.
This is a woman who saw soap with her own eyes, I think.
No, it isn't. That's not what she said.
Well, I told you. I didn't understand
No,
that.
Phil,
Take
here's
my
the
word
thing.
for it.
You didn't hear that she said that you were experimenting on her?
Even the Germans,
Mr. Smith.
even the Germans are.
This is more about it.
This is a German woman. The Germans have confessed to doing this. They're not denying it. See, even the Germans don't deny it.
Are you two atheists? You are. You're atheists, aren't you?
Yes.
That's why you don't believe in anything. If you don't believe in God, you ain't got nothing.
We have a number of people who wanna take part in this discussion, and I want to save some time for you to do that, and we will when we come back in just a moment. Just a word about Mr. Smith's strategy, which is totally legal. You send an ad to campus newspapers across America in which you a revisionist challenge to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And you do begin the ad by saying the ad does not claim that the Holocaust never happened and accuse those who claim that that's your point of muddying the issue. You do challenge other, what you consider to be accepted facts about the Holocaust in the ad.
That's right. Primarily, let me say.
Well, let me just say the ad concludes, for your contribution of $20, I will send you regular updates of our progress. $50 or more, you receive the regular updates, plus 2 book-length excerpts. So it is a fundraiser, which also is legal.
It is a fundraiser, yeah.
But this has been a very successful strategy for you. Mr. Koenig is just one student editor who's then been challenged to decide whether or not to publish this. And, of course, debates break out everywhere, and you get more attention. And throughout this entire...
but you're not asking the right question. The question
you told
is
me
this.
that at the beginning of the program.
Let me ask the question. Listen, the question is, why aren't, for instance, these kids are being told by the professors that there's nothing to revisionist theory and that no revisionist question needs to be answered. These are the historians who are saying that. One reporter from Georgetown University called the museum and said, what about such and such a question in Smith's ad? And the spokesman for the Holocaust Museum said, we don't answer those questions because it's pornography.
No, Bradley, the reason they do this is because they don't want to give the credibility of your argument as if this is a legitimate debate.
They don't have to.
Because it's not being debated. That's not what's being debated by professional historians. And so here's the long-term strategy: is to plant the seed of doubt now, and then when the Holocaust survivors are all gone in the next century, then they'll have a chance.
That's vulgar thing for you to say. The thing is, if there's no intellectual freedom on this issue, why should there be intellectual freedom on any other issue?
I believe there should be intellectual freedom on this issue. That's why you're on the program.
No,
I do think you give yourself away, however, Mr. Smith. You don't seem to have any enthusiasm at all for accepting the incontrovertible fact that Jews were massacred because of their Jewishness under the aegis of the Third Reich in Germany and Poland.
It was an anti-Jewish state. Everyone understands
but you're saying, so what else is new? I don't...
Well, why did Stalin off the Ukrainians?
It's not a moral equivalency.
There's something like 40 million people died. A lot of them were Jews. You know, listen.
Okay,
do
so
we
some
have no
Jews
feeling-
died, some
do we
others
have no
died.
feelings about anything else, about nobody else? Is this the amount of influence in our media and on television that the lives of the other 36 million people who died is of no consequence to you people?
In my city,
Mr. Smith, you
in
said
my
before...
city, nobody was killed but the Jews. Not one person was killed, but all the Jews.
We would have to
about
look into that.
3,000 people in my city alone.
Over here, please.
Mr. Smith, you said before that you've never been to Europe. I'm curious.
Are you listening, Mr. Smith, if you please?
You said before that you've never been to Europe, and I was curious.
These ladies keep interfering.
Yes.
You said before that you've never been to Europe, and I was curious to find out what your educational and professional background is then.
I've been a working man.
What? What?
I've worked with my hands all my life. I've had a bookstore. But listen, this is kind of interesting because this gets into the issue of credentialism.
You don't like this question either?
No, it gets into the issue of credentialism.
Well, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with
First of all, he never answered the question of the other lady of how much money you're personally making off of this.
But you have to read the
why
text.
does it matter to you that these poor people have been sacrificed and there's a museum in Washington? Why do you care? What ethnic background are you?
Because
why not respect them and let them have their museum? It did happen.
I'll give you a chance to speak to that in just a moment.
Advantage.
Got a one-liner?
Yes, sir. What do we have to do to remind ourselves and to always remember when the people that were involved are gone that this happened? What is it we have to do? It's happening now in Bosnia.
That's what museums are for. That's what historians are for. That's what history is.
And that's what personal testimonies are about. And that's why Mrs. Glick and others should be encouraged to have their own account on the record.
All the time.
And that's what the Simon Wiesenthal Institute and the Holocaust Museum is doing. And that's why we would hope that they would step forward and speak directly.
That's what we're doing.
Yes, and why don't they? There's the issue. That's the question that all my advertisements ask. Why
We're
not?
doing it. We're
Why
working
not?
on that.
Yes.
That's what we're working on.
You're doing this for money. That's a shame.
Yeah, she thinks you're doing it for money.
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.